When he looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed but dry. He said, "Doc, I need you to tell me if I'm the one who broke it. Because my wife, my ex-wife now, she says I did. And some days, I believe her." I didn't answer right away. I just nodded, let him settle into the weight of his own question. Then I asked him to start from the beginning, not the end, where the papers were signed and the house was sold and the kids were split between two homes. The real beginning. The place where something first started to shift, even if he didn't notice it at the time. We were married for 18 years. 18. That's not a small number. That's a life built. Linda and I met at a friend's barbecue in the summer of 1997. She was wearing this yellow sundress, and she was arguing with someone about whether the Grateful Dead had sold out after Brent Midland joined. I didn't know anything about the Grateful Dead, but I knew I wanted to hear her argue about everything for the rest of my life. She had this fire in her. Still does, I guess, just pointed in a different direction now. We had 2 kids, a boy, Matthew, who's 14 now, and a girl, Sophie, who's 11. For a long time, we were that couple. You know the one. People would look at us at school functions or neighborhood block parties and say, "They've got it figured out." And I believed them. I believed it so completely that I stopped looking. That's the thing nobody tells you about a good marriage. It can make you lazy. You get comfortable in the warmth of it, and you forget that comfort isn't the same as connection. I think it started around year 12. That's when Linda took a job at a real estate firm downtown. She'd been a stay-at-home mom for 8 years, and she was ready to get back out there. I was proud of her. I told everyone how proud I was. But pride and support aren't the same thing either, are they? I was proud of her in the way you're proud of a house you built that's holding up against the weather. Like her success was a reflection of my stability. I didn't realize she was building something of her own, and I wasn't in the blueprint. She started working late. Then she started working weekends. I didn't think much of it. Real estate is like that, especially when you're new. You take the clients when they're available. I handled dinner, got the kids to soccer and piano, told myself we were in a season of life where we just had to grind it out. That's what I told myself. Grind it out. But there were these small things, little shifts I noticed but didn't let myself sit with. She stopped asking about my day. Not because she was cruel, but because she'd come home with her own stories, her own victories and frustrations, and the space between us just got filled with her world instead of ours. I'd tell her about a project I was managing, a bridge retrofit that had been giving me headaches, and she'd nod while scrolling through emails on her phone. I told myself it was fine. Everyone does that now. It's not personal. But it was personal. It was deeply personal. I just didn't want to see it, because seeing it would have meant admitting that something was already wrong. And I didn't know how to fix wrong. I only knew how to build things that were supposed to last. The first time I really felt it, the crack I mean, was at Matthew's school play. He was in the 4th grade, playing some tree in a production about the rainforest. Not a big role, but he was proud. I got there early, saved seats, texted Linda to remind her it started at 7. She showed up at 7:45, missed his one line. She whispered to me that a client had called at the last minute, that it was a big deal, that she was sorry. Matthew saw her come in. I watched his face go from scanning the crowd to lighting up when he spotted her. He didn't care that she missed his part. He just cared that she was there. But I cared. And I didn't say anything because what was I going to say? Don't work? Don't build a career? That would have made me the bad guy. So I swallowed it, like I swallowed so many things. A few months later, I noticed her phone was always face down. She used to leave it on the counter, screen up, while she cooked. Now she kept it in her pocket or tucked under a napkin at dinner. I told myself it was habit. I told myself I was being paranoid. I was so good at telling myself things. The breaking point, the thing that finally made me stop telling myself stories, was a text message. I wasn't snooping. I swear I wasn't. I was looking for a photo Sophie needed for a school project, and Linda's phone was on the kitchen table. It buzzed. The screen lit up, and I saw the name Greg with a message that said, "Can't stop thinking about Tuesday. You make everything better." Now Greg was the guy she'd been working with. Senior agent. Married. Kids. I'd met him at a company picnic. Seemed fine. Nothing about him had ever set off any alarms. But that message set off every alarm I had. I confronted her that night, after the kids were in bed. I just asked her, plain as I could, who Greg was to her. And she looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before. Not guilt, not anger. It was something closer to relief. Like she'd been waiting for me to ask, and the waiting had been exhausting her. She said it started 6 months earlier, after a late night of paperwork, a drink that turned into 2, a conversation that turned into something else. She said it wasn't about me. That was the first thing she said. "It's not about you, David." And I remember thinking, how could it not be about me? We were married. Everything was about us. She said she'd been feeling invisible, that I looked at her like she was furniture, that she'd needed someone to see her. And Greg, for whatever it's worth, saw her. I asked her if she loved him. She took a long time to answer, too long. And then she said, "I don't know. I thought I did. But I don't know what love is anymore." I moved into the guest room that night. I stayed there for 3 weeks while we tried to figure out what to do. Counseling was mentioned. Separation was mentioned. Divorce was mentioned. But it felt like a word that belonged to other people, not us. We'd made it 18 years. Surely we could make it 18 more. But here's the thing about cracks. Once you see them, you can't unsee them. And I started seeing them everywhere. The way she tensed up when her phone rang. The way she disappeared to the bathroom to take calls. The way she stopped wearing her wedding ring on weekends because she said it irritated her skin. I'd watched her wear that ring through 2 pregnancies, through dishwashing and gardening and everything else that might have irritated her skin. And now, suddenly, it was a problem. I told myself I could forgive her. I told myself that 18 years was worth saving. But forgiveness, I learned, isn't a switch you flip. It's a muscle you have to exercise, and mine had atrophied from years of not being used. I wanted to forgive her. I wanted to go back to the way things were. But the way things were had been an illusion, and once you know the truth of something, you can't unknow it. She ended things with Greg, or said she did. I don't actually know for sure. She changed brokerages, blocked his number, started coming home on time. She tried. I'll give her that. She tried to be present. She put her phone in a drawer when she walked in the door. She'd ask about my day. She'd sit with me on the couch after the kids went to bed, even if we were just watching TV in silence. But the silence was different now. It wasn't comfortable. It was the silence of 2 people who'd said too much and not enough. We tried counseling. 3 different counselors over 14 months. The first one told us to communicate more. The second one told us to date each other again. The third one, a woman who looked like she'd been married for 50 years and had seen it all, looked at me across her little table and said, "David, are you punishing her?" And I didn't have an answer. Not a good one. I wasn't punishing her consciously. I wasn't cruel. I didn't bring it up in fights. I didn't throw it in her face. But I'd stopped looking at her the same way. I'd stopped touching her. Not out of anger, out of something worse. Out of a kind of quiet resignation that what we'd had was gone, and I didn't know how to build it again from scratch. She moved out a year after the confession. Said she couldn't live in a house where she felt like a ghost. I didn't fight her. I didn't have it in me. The divorce was amicable in that business-like way that amicable divorces are. We split assets. We worked out a custody schedule. We told ourselves we were doing it for the kids, and maybe we were. But mostly, I think we were doing it because staying together had become harder than splitting apart, and we were both too tired to pretend anymore. David stopped talking there. He sat back in the chair, rubbed his hands over his face, and let out a breath that seemed to come from somewhere deep. The room was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that holds space for the weight of what's been said. I waited. Then I said, "You didn't come here to tell me about the divorce. You came here because you still don't know if it was your fault." He looked at me, and his eyes were wet now. I loved her. I loved her the only way I knew how. And she says I pushed her away before any of it happened. That I was distant. That I made her feel like she didn't matter. And maybe she's right. Maybe I was so focused on being steady, on being the guy who held everything together, that I forgot to be a husband. I forgot to see her. And by the time I realized it, she'd found someone who did. I let him sit with that for a moment. Then I told him something I've learned over 3 decades of doing this work. "David, here's what I want you to hear. Affairs don't happen in a vacuum. They're almost never about just one thing. Yes, there was distance in your marriage. Yes, you both stopped seeing each other in the way that married people need to be seen. But Linda made a choice, and that choice was hers, not yours. You can carry responsibility for the state of your marriage without carrying blame for her decisions. Those are 2 different things, and mixing them up is how people spend years torturing themselves over something they couldn't have controlled." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "So what do I do with it?" "All of it." I leaned forward. "You learn. That's what we do. We learn what we missed, what we avoided looking at, and we carry that forward, not as guilt, as information. And next time you're in a relationship, if you choose to be, you'll know that comfort isn't the same as connection. You'll know that silence can be a form of distance. You'll know that love isn't something you build once and trust to hold. It's something you build every day. And if you stop building, even for a little while, it starts to crumble." He smiled then, a small, sad smile. "That's a lot of building." "It is," I said. "That's why it matters." He came to see me 4 more times after that. We talked about his kids, about the loneliness of his new apartment, about the strange freedom of being alone after 18 years. He didn't date for a long time. He focused on Matthew and Sophie, on his work, on rebuilding a version of himself that wasn't defined by being half of something that no longer existed. The last time I saw him, he told me he'd started going to a pottery class, something he'd always wanted to try. He said it was good to make things with his hands that weren't bridges or buildings, things that could be imperfect and still be beautiful. He's doing okay now. I get a Christmas card from him every year. He signs it with his name, just his name. And underneath, he writes a short note about the kids, about his work, about the small, steady life he's built for himself. He's not remarried. He's not sure he ever will be. But he's not bitter either. He's just a man who learned a hard lesson about what it costs to stop paying attention. If there's something to take from David's story, and there always is, it's this. Marriage isn't a destination. It's not something you achieve and then possess. It's a practice. A daily, sometimes tedious, sometimes beautiful practice of choosing to see another person. Not the idea of them, not the memory of who they were 10 years ago, but who they are right now, in this moment, with all their complications and contradictions and small, quiet needs. When we stop practicing, we start assuming. An assumption is the enemy of intimacy. We assume we know what our partner is thinking. We assume they know how we feel. We assume that because the bills are paid and the kids are fed and the house is standing, everything must be fine. But everything is never just fine. Everything is always shifting, always becoming something new. And if we're not paying attention, we miss the moment when fine becomes not fine. We miss the small distance that becomes a chasm. We miss the opportunity to turn toward our partner before they turn away. The second thing is this. Betrayal, when it happens, is rarely just about the act itself. It's about the story that came before it. And that story belongs to both people. That's not to excuse anyone's choices, but if we want to understand what happened, if we want to learn anything from it, we have to look at the whole arc. The distance that grew, the words that went unsaid, the quiet, mutual agreement to stop seeing each other. That agreement happens long before anyone else enters the picture. And it's that agreement, that slow drift into separate lives, that leaves the door unlocked. The last thing I'll say is this. We carry our marriages with us, even the ones that end. David still carries his, not as a wound anymore, but as a map. He knows now where he stopped looking. He knows what it cost him. And the next time he loves someone, if he does, he'll be a little more awake, a little more present, a little less willing to mistake comfort for connection. That's not a small thing. That's everything.